Herb might jump in.
That'll do it.
I've seen Herb Dean make some of the most critical calls in the sport. I mean, I could go through a list of film where this guy has seen and pulled off stuff that he's not only is he the best referee, he's the best referee ever in mixed martial arts.
For over 2 decades, one name has been synonymous with trust inside the UFC Octagon.
Wait a minute. People's elbow in this. Yes. You're kidding. Yeah.
Not a fighter, not a champion, a referee.
15 seconds remains in the 10 seconds in the round. What does it take to stop a fight?
Herb Dean has been the third man in the cage for some of the biggest fights in UFC history.
Heavy shots. Dean standing by.
The guy fans trusted to make the right call when everything was on the line. But over the last few months, that trust has completely collapsed. Fighters are furious. Fans are calling for his job. Legends of the sport are stepping in to defend him. And the UFC itself is reportedly starting to quietly pull him away from its biggest events. So what actually happened to Herb Dean? How does one of the most respected referees in combat sports history end up at the center of this much backlash, seemingly overnight?
It's Herb. And now, it's time to rock the Octagon!
This is the tragic downfall of Herb Dean, now 55 years old, and why the situation just keeps getting worse. To understand why this story is such a big deal, you need to understand who Herb Dean actually is inside the sport of MMA.
Big spots against the sport's best. Oh, another pull.
What you do is I need you to relax. We'll breathe and relax and let the doctor take a look, okay?
Dean isn't some inexperienced official who stumbled into a high-profile job. He's one of the most veteran referees in UFC history, having officiated hundreds of fights across more than 2 decades inside the Octagon.
Espinal cannot believe the fight was stopped.
For years, he's been considered one of the most reliable, experienced hands in the business. The kind of referee promotions trust with their biggest main events and title fights.
Dustin's in real trouble. It's under the neck. It's under the neck. It's under the neck.
Referees in combat sports occupy a strange position. When they do their job well, nobody notices them. Nobody's watching a fight thinking about the referee. But the moment something controversial happens, a bad stoppage, a missed foul, an inconsistent point deduction, that referee instantly becomes the story.
Oh, he's been on his heel off. How is Russell doing insane? Wow, what happened there?
For most of his career, Herb Dean rarely became the story. He was simply part of the background of some of the sport's most iconic moments. But that reputation has taken a serious hit in 2026, as a string of controversial officiating decisions piled up in a way fans and fighters simply couldn't ignore anymore. The most recent wave of criticism against Herb Dean traces back to UFC Freedom 250 in a fight involving former UFC champion Alex Pereira against Cyril Gane. During that fight, Gane landed a series of strikes that Pereira and his camp believed illegally connected to the back of his head, strikes that are supposed to be against the rules. Dean, positioned as the referee, didn't intervene or penalize Gane for it, and the fight ultimately ended in a TKO loss for Pereira. Pereira didn't let it go quietly. He publicly voiced his frustration with how Dean handled the sequence, expressing genuine anger about it afterward. This wasn't just a fighter making excuses for a loss. Pereira went as far as expressing reluctance about wanting to compete again under similar circumstances, essentially calling out Dean's officiating directly. That alone would have been a rough stretch for any referee, but it turned out to be just the beginning. Less than a month after the Pereira and Gane controversy, a strikingly similar situation happened again, this time involving fighter Andre Fili. At UFC Vegas 119, Fili suffered a loss to Vinicius Oliveira, and once again questions arose about strikes landing to the back of the head without Dean stepping in to penalize them. Fili, like Pereira before him, expressed real frustration about how the fight had been officiated. 2 similar incidents, involving 2 different fighters, in 2 consecutive events, is the kind of pattern that's almost impossible for fans and media to ignore. But then came UFC Baku, and this is the moment that truly pushed the story into a full-blown crisis. In the co-main event between Shera Magomedov and Michel Pereira, Dean repeatedly warned Magomedov over the course of the fight for fouls, including hair-pulling and an eye poke. Multiple warnings, multiple fouls. But at no point did Dean actually take a point away. Magomedov went on to win the fight by unanimous decision. And because he was never docked a point despite repeated warnings, the outcome of that decision is now permanently tied to a massive officiating controversy. If even 1 point had been deducted, the entire outcome of that fight could have shifted from a win to a draw. Fans and MMA media didn't hold back. The criticism this time wasn't just about one bad moment. It was about a growing, undeniable pattern of inconsistent officiating from one of the sport's most veteran referees. What makes this situation especially serious is that it's not just fans complaining on social media anymore. It's the fighters themselves, the people whose careers and paychecks are directly impacted by these decisions, speaking out. Alex Pereira didn't just complain once and move on. He continued raising the issue well after his loss to Gane, and reportedly explored formally appealing the outcome of that fight specifically because of how Dean handled the illegal strikes. Then, when the Magomedov and Michel Pereira controversy happened, Alex Pereira spoke out about that too, essentially becoming one of the loudest voices calling attention to Dean's pattern of missed calls. When a former UFC champion is speaking out about a referee's performance not once, but multiple times, across multiple different fights that don't even directly involve him, that's a signal the issue has become bigger than any single controversial moment. It becomes a referendum on trust. UFC President Dana White was asked directly about the growing controversy. Rather than jumping in personally to make a decision, White said it was ultimately up to the Athletic Commission to handle concerns about Dean's officiating, effectively distancing the promotion itself from directly intervening, while acknowledging the criticism was serious enough to require an official response from somewhere. Despite the mounting criticism, Herb Dean hasn't been without support. Legendary referee Big John McCarthy, one of the most respected officiating voices in MMA history, spoke out in defense of Dean, revealing that the two have spoken directly about the criticism. According to McCarthy, Dean isn't ignoring the backlash, he's taking it seriously, and he's genuinely listening to what fighters, fans, and media are saying about his recent performances. McCarthy also revealed something that suggests the UFC itself may already be quietly responding behind the scenes, that there's been a deliberate effort to ease some of the pressure on Dean by keeping him away from the sport's highest stakes, highest pressure fights for the time being, allowing him to work through lower profile events while the situation cools down. That detail is significant. It suggests this isn't just a media narrative blown out of proportion. It's serious enough that people inside the sport, including a fellow veteran referee, believe some kind of adjustment is necessary. It's also worth noting that Herb Dean has weathered criticism before in his career, and has previously discussed handling backlash professionally rather than reacting emotionally to it. Dean has historically been the kind of official who lets his continued presence in the sport speak for itself, rather than engaging publicly in back-and-forth arguments with critics. At the heart of this entire story is something bigger than one referee having a rough few months. It's about what fans and fighters expect from officiating in a sport where every single decision can be the difference between a win, a loss, and in some cases, serious physical safety. Illegal strikes to the back of the head aren't just technical rule violations. They carry real risk of serious injury. When a referee fails to step in and enforce those rules consistently, it's not just about fairness in scoring. It's about protecting fighters from unnecessary additional damage during a bout. And the point deduction issue from the Magomedov and Michel Pereira fight strikes at something even more fundamental: the actual outcome of a professional athlete's career record. A missed point deduction isn't just an awkward moment, it's a decision that can be the difference between a win and a draw on a fighter's permanent record, something that follows them for the rest of their career. That's exactly why this situation has escalated the way it has. It's not simply about bruised egos or fans wanting drama. It's about whether one of the sport's most veteran officials can still be trusted with the responsibility that comes with being the only person in the cage, empowered to enforce the rules in real time. So where does this leave Herb Dean? As of now, he remains part of the UFC's roster of officials, but reportedly with reduced involvement in the promotion's biggest, highest pressure events while things settle. He has the support of respected voices like John McCarthy, who insists Dean is taking the criticism seriously rather than dismissing it. But he also has a growing list of fighters, including a former UFC champion, publicly questioning his consistency. The uncomfortable truth is that reputations built over 20-plus years can erode surprisingly fast when several high-profile controversies stack up in a short amount of time. Whether Herb Dean can steady the ship and return to the trusted, background presence he was for most of his career, or whether this stretch marks a permanent turning point in how he's viewed by the sport, is something only time, and his next few performances, will answer. So what's your take? Is Herb Dean genuinely losing a step after 2 decades in the cage? Or is this just a rough patch getting blown out of proportion by fighters looking for someone to blame? Let me know your honest opinion in the comments below. If you want more breakdowns on the biggest controversies happening in the UFC right now, make sure you're subscribed, and I'll see you in the next video.